Welcome to Tales from SYL Ranch, live, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone. And tonight on Tales from SYL Ranch, we have, of course, the usual weekly Lincoln, Lancaster County, Nebraska virus statistics for where I live. We will talk about how the government has driven us all insane over the last year or so. We will talk about how Alex Kurtzman is set to ruin yet another pair of beloved Star Trek characters. We will have the usual weekly woke report. We'll talk about the heart disease pandemic that is currently running rampant in the United States. We'll talk about anything else I can think of, and frankly, anything else that you want. Now, this is a live stream, so you are free to talk with me about anything that you want in chat. You can ask me any question, whether it's political, social, the virus whose name I can't mention without risking the video being banned on certain platforms, the United States Civil War II, or even things pertaining to science fiction, fantasy, horror, superheroes, and other related genres. I'm happy to answer each and every question in as much detail and as truthfully as I can. Now, there are some personal subjects that I won't discuss, but anything else is fair game. I get to as many of my viewers as possible with the understanding that I don't really want my stream to last longer than about 3 hours. And the reason for that is I am an old man, and 3 hours in this chair starts to hurt my back. Now, ordinarily, I'd probably give instructions about how to call into the show, but frankly, I'm trying to stream to YouTube, to Facebook, and to Twitch simultaneously, and I kind of got my hands full dealing with that right at the moment. You can't see me doing it, but off screen, I have all kinds of junk. So for the moment, I'm just going to do things in chat. I have also, at least temporarily, taken chat windows out of my videos. They used to be up here. I'll be watching the chat on the various platforms where I see them, and when I see someone say something, I will call out what they've said and what platform. But the problem is basically the complexity that I get when I try to stick all of these new window elements up, and it just starts to drive me insane. So for the moment, I have talked to my sometimes pseudo-producer about maybe coming up with a solution where I can have all the chat in one simple window and be able to do it that way. So we'll see how that goes. Topics tonight include, well, of course, the usual Lincoln Lancaster County virus statistics. So to answer the question that nobody asked, what are the statistics for the virus for Lincoln Lancaster County, Nebraska, where I live? Now, the source for this, as always, is in my description box on the YouTube and Facebook side. It will appear in the description when I'm done with the stream on Twitch because of the way it works. That's always the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department, and again, linked to below if you're on Facebook or Twitch, or YouTube, rather. Now, some of my statistics, if you look at that, aren't quite the same as the Lincoln Lancaster County Health Department. And this is because I'm actually using a more accurate count of the county population. They're using like the, I don't know, a census or an estimate, where I've got something that's a little more accurate. The total Lancaster County population remains roughly at 324,216. Total number of Lancaster County deaths due to the virus has gone to 232, which is up 2 from last week. Now, for comparison, just in terms of showing you exactly what this means, the number of people who died of heart disease in 2019 in Lancaster County, Nebraska, was 485, which means that over about a year and a quarter, the number of people who have died of the virus remains less than half of the number who died of heart disease in only 1 year in 2019. The total number of Lancaster County positive tests is at 30,544, which is up at 231 from last week. This continues a downward trend of the increases. Yes, we're seeing an increase, but it peaked quite a while back, and the number of increases is going down. It is, however, statistically the same minor increase as last week. The number of county positive cases, which I don't show on here, that are classified as recovered, is at 27,503, which is up 291 from last week. Now, I don't know what this classification means precisely, medically, what the hell that means. Given that there are only 232 deaths, I guess I have to suppose that that leaves about 27,271 people in some sort of Schrodinger's cat-style limbo as both dead and not dead. The number of total completed vaccinations, that is, they've had both of them, is at 170,394, which is up a hefty 9,217 from last week. This puts the percentage of the population that has been vaccinated at 33.124%, which is up at 2.843% from last week. Given, as always, as has been since the beginning when they started these vaccines, given our other statistics and rates of increase, the vaccines actually have yet to have the slightest effect. As always, deaths as a percentage of positive cases is at 0.7596%, which is up 0.0006% from last week, a statistically identical number. Deaths as a percentage of population is at 0.0716%, up 0.0007% from last week. And this is not only statistically identical, it's basically statistically identical since the pandemic started. We have seen this exact same thing. It doesn't matter about any of the stuff they've given us. Well, let's see, just glancing down here real quick, got to get on my secondary monitor here. I'm having some trouble figuring out how to monitor Facebook stuff. Upvoted, quoted me. Sorry, I've got too many things here. Well, where's the live stream on my secondary monitor? It's not showing anything. Primary monitor shows it. Okay, well, hell, I'm not quite sure how I'm going to monitor the any of the stuff that's going on YouTube. I mean, on the Facebook side. I've got myself in the event, but I can't see where the damn comments are going in. So if I don't see your comment on the Facebook side, I'm very sorry about that. I'm doing what I can, man. It gets weird. I got 4 different pictures of myself down below on what's actually streaming right now, a major monitor for myself up here, and a secondary monitor if I need it here. If you are in there someplace on any of those chats, particularly on Twitch or YouTube, I'd appreciate just an ACK at this point. It certainly looks like everything's okay with my streams, but having somebody just say, hey, I'm here, I can see you, would be useful for me. I don't have a gigantic audience at any given time, and my various control panels are showing minor people watching, so just an ACK, hello, thanks, I'm here. So, talking about basically the major topic of this stream, how the government has driven us completely insane over the last year. As you know, most people have been stuck in their homes. And most people, unlike me, are not severe introverts. May not seem like it when I'm sitting here jabbering on at you from a screen, but really in real life, I don't go much of any place. I go get groceries, stuff like that. I don't really get out, and it's not a real big problem for me. Psychologically, just how I'm wired, I don't really have a problem with it. However, that is totally different from the average person. I saw this in action quite a number of years ago. There's a company in Lincoln that does basically various medical type of studies, studying like half-lives of various drugs and things like that. How long does it take for the drug to go away? They get a new medication that is pretty safe, but they want to know, okay, how long is it going to be that it'll stay in the bloodstream and before it becomes ineffective? So they will take, at least then, I don't know if they still exist, but back then when I was in college, they would take college students, and my God, it was a wonderful way to earn money. You could earn more money in a weekend to study than you could earn for weeks and weeks and weeks on the, if you were trying to do it a regular study, just a part-time job. So it was great. You had to be male for the most part. They had a few studies that were female. But you could go in for a weekend study. You would be confined. It would be, they'd make sure that they were careful about what you ate. They had to do blood draws from time to time. They would, you might take urine samples, feces samples, depending on the drug. So I did those for a few weekends, and then once during a break or summer or something like that, they had one that went on an entire week. Now understand, this was before the internet. This was more or less when cable TV was giving you, 50 or so channels. And there wasn't really a hell of a lot to do. It was very much like being in jail. You could not leave. If you left, you forfeited any money that you might have. So I remember this one study that I did. There were probably 50 to 75 guys. I don't remember, but 50 to 75 of us in this freaking room, or in this study, and it wasn't really a problem for me, although I did get stultifyingly bored on many occasions. The confinement wasn't so much of a problem. It was just I got bored. But about 10 of the guys couldn't stand it. It was too much like being in jail. So they bailed. They snuck out the back door. And they always have, more than they need for the study because they expect that to happen. But I mean, that was just a week's confinement. So here we are talking about an entire year. For most people, it's like feeling like they're in jail. You can get out for certain things, but for the most part, you're stuck in your house. This is not psychologically healthy at all. You got to be somebody like me who really doesn't care all that much. I'm an introvert anyway. If I don't go out, I don't care. I hadn't been going to movies for the longest time anyway, partly because, at my age, the dating pool is really small. And that's the only reason that I could cost justify going to a movie is if I was taking some woman on a date and trying to impress her. So for me, it's not a big deal. But for the average person, this is incredibly psychologically unhealthy. Over the course of the last year and a quarter, we have now seen the teen suicide rate double. I cannot believe that has anything else than to do with the fact that these poor kids have been stuck in their homes with no one to associate with, no socialization. That can't possibly be good for you. The teen suicide rate has doubled. We've also put tens of millions of people straight into the poorhouse. We have closed so many businesses. I mean, at the beginning, 50 million people started filing for unemployment. 50 million people sent into the poorhouse. The economic impact of that has been staggering. And the amount of money the government's been giving out has been freaking laughable. The amount that they gave out this last time, $700? In my market, Lincoln, Nebraska, you could maybe, if I had a one-bedroom apartment, I could probably pay my rent for 1 month with that. But if you get out of my market, you get into the coasts, $700, that isn't going to get you anywhere. So it puts a lot of pressure on people, and when you look at it and statistically, the major thing that causes people to break up in a marriage is arguments over money. That is the biggest deal in many people's lives. I mean, most people just live paycheck to paycheck. And when you have no paycheck, where the hell are you getting your food? How are you paying your rent? This is going to become incredibly stressful. I've been there. I know how stressful it is. My God, it's just, oh God, this bill's coming. I have to time it out so maybe I can pay that one or let this one slide for a little while and pay for it a little later, even though it's going to be after the due date. Hell, I know what that's like. It sucks. And it's really stressful. And it's been stressful now for people for over a year and a quarter that we have had these tens of millions of people in the poorhouse. And the only people that have benefited from this are pharmaceutical companies and scammers. I mean, I'm going to leave aside the notion of whether a pharmaceuticals company is scamming or not. That is a whole other issue. But I have to write roughshod on one of my relatives' emails. Because they suffer from a certain level of dementia. And I have to watch what's coming in for them. And it's really irritating. Every time that they come up with a new top-level domain, top-level domains used to be just things like .com, .net, .org, etc., stuff, .edu, whatever your country is. But now they've opened up all kinds of new top-level domains. And, every time they do that, scammers absolutely invade those domains. I don't even know why they're doing it, because ultimately I end up blocking entire top-level domains. Most recently, I have been blocking the .cam new top-level domain because it's nothing but scammers coming through there. And unfortunately, this individual whose email I watch isn't internet savvy or computer savvy enough to know when they're seeing nothing but a scam. And so the scammers, they're really doing gangbusters business. The scammers are doing wonderful. Everybody else is getting screwed. Now, in addition to all that, the isolation, like you're in jail, the lack of socialization, which is not good for you at all. People need to have contact with other people on a regular basis. Because of all this, we are now seeing the most psychologically vulnerable among us starting to crack and shooting at both themselves and others. There is absolutely no question in my mind that this rash of mass shootings and other shootings lately is the result of being in jail and not being able to socialize, not being able to leave your house, having horrible financial issues and all kinds of stressors. Now, the average person is going to be, even if they're not like me, it's just going to be really stressful for them. They're going to take it out in other ways. I suspect we'll see a spat of divorces. They'll take it out in other ways. But someone who is on the edge to start with is going to snap. And I think that's what's happening with these. We're starting to see these people snap. And then we have our violent mobs, which have been going now for, I could check, it's 330 some days. I'm going to have a big anniversary celebration on the 365th day. But they're increasing again for a number of factors. And I think the inability to socialize, to have normal social relationships, is at least part of what is driving that. Our students from the kindergarten through the doctorate level are learning precisely nothing. I was an instructor for several years at, as I always say on this show, the place that shall not be named. I was instructor there for 3 years at the college level at a technical school. In order to do online learning, you have to have two things. The first is an instructor who is capable of producing teaching materials that will be effective online. The number of instructors, the number of teachers who are capable of doing that, K through doctorate, is infinitesimal. Utterly infinitesimal. And when you get into certain fields like, IT that I was teaching, right? There were times when, we'd be doing standard Microsoft issued coursework, right, for certain types of things. We'd be doing coursework for this, coursework for that. We'd be issued standardized labs. I would still have to, every single quarter, walk through every single lab to make sure that it actually worked. And if it didn't, I had to rewrite it to hand it out to my students. That was stuff that came straight from Microsoft. I double dog dare you to do that level of instruction in IT online. It's impossible. You can't do it. And even if you could, you still have to have teaching materials that will work online. And having people who are doing Zoom conferences for classes, as they seem to be doing a lot in the K through 12. Come on, man. Come on. That what's happening is you just got a student at best, sitting there pretending to pay attention. I was in K through 12 once. I know how students basically spend a lot of their time trying to figure out how to get away with doing as little work as humanly possible. Not having them in a classroom setting where you can control to some extent, where you can at least say to the ones that are being complete lumps, hey, wake up, listen to what I'm saying. You can't do that online. It's impossible. I guarantee the overwhelming majority of students are just sitting there doing something else. I would be stunned. I mean, you could do this, right? I'm looking towards my screen, and I could be playing freaking games on my phone. I'm certain that that's happened. Maybe they're just playing outright video games. Who the hell knows? I have a headset that I plug in if I'm doing call-ins, and you could be having a teacher drone in your ear while you're playing GTA 5. I guarantee that's what the vast majority are doing. And in fact, a few months ago, I don't know what the student body is for K through 12 public schools in Lincoln, Nebraska. I don't know what it is. We've got a population of 324K in this county. I don't know what it is. It's tens of thousands. But they had, somebody looked halfway through the year, at least 5,000, no, it was less than 5,000 students had ever logged into their online coursework. Out of what must be at least 10,000, maybe 20,000. I mean, it's got to be larger than University of Nebraska, which is about 30,000. But at least that many people, only 5,000 had ever logged into their online coursework. And I can tell you, having done some coursework online myself, I was learning the Java programming language at one point a number of years ago, and I took it at a local community college, and they had the courses and the tests, and the quizzes, all of them online. Okay. The first week, I went through and took every single test and quiz and aced them. And that's because I had access to Google. If you're sitting there in a test online on your screen and you can Google the answers, I aced every single one of them. First week, I aced every single one of them. Those tests and quizzes were utterly meaningless in terms of what I learned in that course. Now, I did sit down and learn stuff in that course. The point of doing that was, A, to notice that, I can actually ace all of these things without having actually done damn thing in, the course. And B, that it was not representative of what I was learning. But I did sit down, I learned it, I did all the coursework because I wanted to learn that language. And that is the other thing that you need. If you're going to have online learning, you must have students who are motivated to actually do it. And the overwhelming majority of students are not motivated. They don't have the necessary focus to sit there and do online coursework. They need to have book coursework and an instructor giving them deadlines and all of that. They've got to have that. If they don't have that structure, they will not do the work. So that means all of these students, kindergarten through 12, and all of the colleges and universities that are doing all of this online crap, and God, the hoops that they're running through at the University of Nebraska at Lincoln, 30,000 students there, are so utterly ridiculous. I had one of my nephews start at University of Nebraska earlier this year, and he quit because it was a pointless exercise in futility. If the University of Nebraska was being honest, they would shut the place down and stop wasting their students' money. Because they're costing an arm and a leg because the federal government covers all the student loans. They can run up the tuition to any frickin' thing that they want to. So these poor students are paying an arm and a leg and not getting nothing out of it. If the University of Nebraska were being honest, they'd shut the place down. So my nephew, being a smart guy, said, well, this is a pointless waste of time. I'm not going to waste my money on this. And he quit. That's the right thing to do. If you're a student at the college level, quit. Come back when they actually have classrooms filled with students and no online coursework to speak of. Because if you don't, you will be learning absolutely nothing. All of these students are spending a year learning nothing. And the way K through 12 works, I say on this show frequently, I have an entire video series about America's broken schools. They're not teaching your kids anything to speak of in K through 12 in the first place. So all that means, if they're literally teaching nothing this year, they're going to just pass those kids. There's going to be an entire generation that for a year or more was accustomed to not being disciplined to do a damn thing and not learning anything whatsoever. That is horrifying in terms of social fabric. We've got to have an educated workforce. We're sending kids through K through 12 and through college who are learning precisely dick. In addition to all of that, in terms of having the government drive us completely insane, we are now a nation of totally irrational hypochondriacs. I mean, it's total hypochondriacs. Hey, Star Cheese Player, how you doing tonight? I mentioned early on in the stream that I've taken my chat windows out. Star Cheese Player says, hi, everyone, from the YouTube side of things. Because it's too difficult to manage in terms of putting all these freaking windows together. I have to do it like right before the stream starts, and I still haven't figured out how the hell that I'm going to see any of the comments that may be coming up on Facebook. I don't see where I can even see them. So I guess I can see. Oh my God, I can see comments. Hold on, can I pop this out? Oh yes, let's pop that out. Oh, cool. I've popped out my comments on Facebook. If anybody comments on Facebook, I can see it now. Awesome. Hey, Jason Hand. Hi, Star Cheese Player and Bill. He says hi to you as well. So in addition to all that, like I say, we have turned into a nation of irrational hypochondriacs. On this show once, I told a story about how I had run into a gaggle of Karens. I went into this fast food joint, right, that legally has an open restaurant. You have open dining room. You have to, socially distance. Nobody I ever saw walking in there was wearing a mask, not walking in, because, they had the dividers, between various booths and whatnot were this high, well below where you were breathing. And so I walk in without my mask this one time, and this gaggle of Karens at one of the booths immediately put their masks to their faces and go, "Oh my God, where's your mask?" And I said, "Well, look around. We're all breathing the same air." "Well, what about the guy taking your order?" "Well, you mean the one who's behind a, plexiglass shield? The one who does stuff through the drive-through with no shield whatsoever?" And I still couldn't get him to see reason, so I went out and I got my mask, which, if anybody knows, is this big, stupid steampunk gas mask. And they all laughed, as they often do. And the reason I wear that is because it elicits a laughter reaction, and then I can talk to people about what our actual statistics are. I have a viewer on the YouTube side who told me that when her husband thought that she's local, her husband thought that we had thousands of deaths, when as of yesterday, we have only 232. Most people have been conditioned by our damned lying press that this is so bad that we have thousands upon thousands of deaths in this county. And we don't. We have fewer deaths than we have in heart disease. So, as I say, when I wear those things, and even then with those gaggle of Karens who were just terrified for their lives, I was able to talk to them about the real statistics, and, they got cool about it. They were very cool about it. Starseeds Player on YouTube says, "I didn't know that was why you wore the silly over-the-top gas mask." Yes, I do to some extent. Partly it's for me just being passive-aggressive against a stupid mask order, which, by the way, here is set to expire tomorrow, but it was already set to expire on the 12th, and they extended it, so I'm assuming they're going to extend it again. But I'll let you know next week whether they actually lifted it. But yeah, that's part of why I wear it. People will ask for selfies because they think it's stupid as well. Most people think it's stupid here. I wear it, to the grocery store, and it's one of those superstores, giant grocery store, and a number of the employees that I have never noticed before know who I am because I come in there every week or so wearing this big freaking mask, and they'll often ask to have selfies with me. People do that a lot. And again, it gives me an opportunity to talk about what the actual statistics are. And most of them, as I say, are assuming that it's much higher than 232 deaths, which it's not. We have turned into a nation of freaking hypochondriacs. And this is evidenced by the amount of spam that I am having to deal with a relative whose email I have to kind of monitor. It's just amazing the amount of spam that I have to deal with. So, all of that put together. Jason Hand on YouTube said, with the virus, it's more likely that people will die of depression and isolation from other people. I mentioned that towards the beginning of this rant, that one of the worst things about this is people, my story was, I'll just repeat it real quickly. I took part when I was in college a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. When I was at the University of Nebraska, I took part in a company that does half-life studies of medications. Basically, they inject you with something and then take a lot of blood draws, do urine samples, feces samples, etc., to see how long the drug remains in your bloodstream. And one of them that I did was a week long. And it was a confinement study. You had to stay on the premises. They had to monitor, specifically give you what you ate, when you went to sleep, when you got up, when you get to the urine, when they did blood draws, all of that. And it was so much like being in jail for some of the guys that about 10 of them bailed on the study. They just went out the door and forfeited because it was too much. They were completely isolated. And this is worse. They're completely isolated. If you're not me, I'm an introvert. I don't care. But the average person is going to feel very isolated. They're going to get depressed. And I think this is, when you get to some of them that are a little bit on the edge mentally, some of them crack. And that's why we're starting to see an uptick in some of these mass shootings and other shootings, because people are so screwed up. And the ones that are on the edge are so screwed up psychologically from what's happened, what they've done to us. Stretchy Spirit says, I read USA Today this evening that Fauci is now saying herd immunity is now impossible because not enough people are getting vaccinated. Well, Fauci, you need to look at my county. Clearly, the statistics show that the vaccine has had zero impact, despite the fact that 30% of the people are getting it. Fauci's a freaking idiot. He's an example of your average person in government who is using this in order to get their own level of power, of personal power. As I always say, inside of every single politician, from your local mayor all the way up to the president, is someone screaming this. That is your mayor. That is your city council person. That is your congressperson. That is your senator. That is your president. That is all of their staffs and hangers-on. Every single one of them has someone inside of them doing that. Really. So Fauci's just another one of those. And what you can ask these guys, if you really want to know what, when or if this is ever going to change, what you say to them is a real simple question. Under what conditions can I take off this mask and things will go back to normal? They will not have an answer. In fact, Fauci was grilled on one of the committees. I happened to catch a little piece of it. He had no answer to that question either. None of them have an answer to that question. You can't say, well, when we get the death toll down to this, when it reaches this point, when we have the rates of increase hitting, zero or something like that. No, they can't even say that. They have no criteria. When you have no criteria, all you're dealing with is the emperor of the galaxy. Stretchy Spirit on YouTube is saying no. Fauci's stories change all the time. Yeah, he contradicts himself constantly, and you got furious. Yeah, me too. The guy's just a power mad sociopathic narcissist, like all the rest of them. Jason Hand on YouTube says, I have doubts with the vaccines as one causing clots and the virus moves around it, mutates to new strains. Well, I tell you in all honesty, I've said this also on the show before, but I have not had the vaccine, nor do I intend to ever take it. And my GP agrees with my reason. And that is, I am on quite a number of medications. Quite a number. I guess I'm 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 medications, because I'm old, because I have a anxiety disorder, because I'm diabetic, and all of these things work together in a kind of negative way. But like, for example, the medication that I'm using to handle my anxiety disorder is not specifically recommended for anxiety. I'm using it for what they call off-brand reasons because it has a side effect that is very good with my particular strain of anxiety disorder. Well, as I say, sometimes you're dealing with side effects. Sometimes you're dealing with interactions on all of those medications. And my GP believes, just as I do, that it's a bad idea to start taking or to take a medication that has not gone through the extremely rigorous and lengthy, trials, studies, clinical trials, etc., in order to know what the actual effectiveness is on a large population and what the side effects are. You could well with that, since it did not go through this rigorous scientific process, you could well have something that, given my massive number of medications, would have a negative interaction and cause me a problem. I'm not going to get it. I mean, my risk of exposure to the damn thing is so tiny anyway. Here I am. I'm basically an introvert. I'm sitting at home most of the time. When I go out, I'm wearing my stupid mask, and I'm never exposed to it. So even though I'm older and I have diabetes, which puts me in a higher risk bracket, I'm never exposed to this stuff. There's no reason I should have to take it. Starseeds Player says on YouTube, Jason, the claw is extremely rare. That is true. It actually makes some sense since it is the only one that is the traditional virus vaccine, and some people who get the real active virus can cause clots. Yes, that's true. Stretchy Spirit says, I'm not a doctor, but I expect those 6 people from J&J would have been totally screwed if they got the active virus. Very possible, very possible. I mean, you're talking there also about a very statistically tiny number of people. But for me, we're still dealing with a medication that we don't really know what the side effects are, if any. And we don't really know what the interactions might be with the 8 or so meds that I'm on. So I ain't taking it. But it shouldn't be a problem, because if vaccines work, then ultimately anybody who could be getting the virus will have been vaccinated, probably. And those of us who are never exposed to it will never have a problem. That's how vaccines work, at least how they're supposed to work. The chickenpox vaccine. Oh, God. When I was a kid, I got chickenpox before they had a vaccine. It was horrifying. And it ran through, schools that way, right? Because you'd go to school and you'd be sick but didn't know it. And so, 30, 50 people, 100 people would get exposed to you. That's how that went through. And you have it once, and it's a pain in the ass back then, but not usually life-threatening. And then you never get it again. And then at my kids' age, they had the virus for it. So they never got it. Chickenpox has essentially been eliminated because of that vaccine. And that's how the vaccines are supposed to work. You either are never exposed to it, like I am, and so it's never an issue for anyone, ever. I'm not carrying it. Or you get it, and then you're probably never going to get it again. Or you get an effective vaccine, one that's gone through lengthy trials and all of those scientific studies, and they know what the efficacy is in a large population. And you get that, and you're done. And the whole thing is eradicated. But unfortunately, we don't know that. We don't know what the efficacy is, which is why from time to time, I hear various rumors, might have to go back for a third vaccine. Really, a third injection? Seriously? Because we don't know what the efficacy actually is. Starseeds Player on YouTube says, no, Jason Hand, I'm sorry. I'm talking about the AstraZeneca one, but given the low risk of the virus to begin with, it's a toss-up for me as to whether it's worth taking. Yeah. My mother was elderly. She got it. And I think that makes some sense in her case, because in her particular case, she has pre-existing conditions that mean even if I get a significant upper respiratory infection of any kind, I'm out of the house. I live with her, and I'm out of the house into a motel room, because if she gets an upper respiratory infection, it's very possible that she could get pneumonia and die. So for her, getting it makes sense because you just don't want her to get the respiratory infection. And, she doesn't seem to have a problem with her underlying pre-existing conditions. So for her, it makes some sense. For me, it makes almost none. But if we knew for sure what the efficacy of the virus was, well, then we would know for sure that that it's essentially been eradicated. Herd immunity wouldn't even be an issue. It'd be just like chickenpox in my kids. They got the vaccine, they never had it and never will. So all of this combined, all of this junk put together, says to me that clearly, the cure was actually worse than the disease. What has happened in terms of people's mental health, and that's the biggest thing, their mental health. The doubling of the teen suicide rate, the amount of violence that we're starting to see, the depression, the isolation, the feeling like you're in jail, and really you are. The pressures from all of the financial pressures because so many people have been thrown into the poorhouse, and what they get from government isn't helping at all. You would have to get a significant amount for it to actually help, and they haven't given it, and frankly they can't because they don't have the money. There isn't enough money coming in terms of taxation to be able to hand out that kind of money. Yes, Starshies Player on YouTube. 2 weeks to flatten the curve. That was how long it was supposed to last. And frankly, I called it then. It's never going to end. I don't believe that this will ever end. And that is simply because inside of every single one of your politicians, you have this. They are the Emperor of the Galaxy, and you are Mace Windu. It will never end. It was an excuse for unlimited power. We gave them control over our bodies. We will never get it back. It is exactly like the airport security theater that was instituted after 9/11. Utterly useless. And I know, I'm a guy who used to be an international courier. Any terrorist that wants to blow up a plane can still do so with ease. It would be simple. From what I know, easy. Lots of pilots and flight attendants will tell you the exact same thing. This does nothing, absolutely nothing, to stop terrorism. What it did do was condition 2 entire generations of Americans that they don't have any rights the moment that they get into airports. So it'll be the same thing with this. Generations of Americans will now grow up wearing these damned masks because it will never go away, because we have people who want unlimited power, and we just handed over control of our bodies to them. Marketing coordinator on YouTube is saying there was no disease, it's just the flu/cold. Yeah, I don't even know how to evaluate the number of people they say have died from this. What I do know is it is less than the number of people who died of heart disease. Here in Lancaster County, 232 deaths as of yesterday from the virus. In 2019 alone, 485 from heart disease. We haven't even reached half of the number who have died of heart disease. When you look at it nationally, I'm going to get into that later, as a matter of fact. I'm going to talk about the heart disease pandemic that is currently running through the United States. But while it's closer to the number of people who died from heart disease, it's still not as much. The cure has been worse than the disease. It has left us permanently, probably some people, permanently destitute. It has left the overwhelming majority of people, not just in the United States, but in the entire world, psychologically damaged, probably forever. Stretchy Spirit says you told the death rate went down last year. Are you talking about the virus or heart disease? Marketing coordinator says the virus equals certificate of vaccination ID hiding in plain sight. Yes, there is that as well. My mother got it. She's got a little thing. It would be very, very, very easy with somebody with my computer skills to forge them. If it becomes necessary, I plan to make a small amount of money doing just that. Jason Han on YouTube says many countries and airlines have mentioned a health/travel passport requiring the vaccination, and travel bubbles is, i.e. limited travel to nearby countries. Yeah, they've been talking about that too. Long as it's not a law, I don't exactly have any problem with that. As long as there is a competitive airline doing similar service, but without, these things being required. If it does become required, well, I assume that it will be able to be forged. If that happens, talk to me. All death causes, total death rate decrease. That may very, very well be, even with the virus deaths. You're saying Starchy's player on YouTube. Yeah, it may well be. I don't know. I haven't. I paid more attention to the 2019 numbers pre-virus because I know from my own personal experience. A relative who passed away, they classified it as a virus-related death, even though it was actually a heart attack. And that was an absolute certainty. So I don't even know how to evaluate the numbers both locally and nationally in terms of their accuracy. I don't know for sure what they're counting. I'm crossing my fingers and hoping that Lancaster County is more or less accurate. But I don't know that for sure because I know for a fact that it was padded at least by one. Marketing coordinator says, YouTube, no body rules if no one obeys. Sadly, because we have become now a nation of hypochondriacs, I think everybody, the vast majority, percentage of people will obey. They have not done like we're seeing in some other countries where we see people coming out and taking to the streets over it. We see people taking to the streets over ridiculous crap, but not over this virus. If we're going to have riots, I would like to see riots over what they've done to us because of the virus. But we're not seeing that. I think the vast majority of people, just like with pointless airport security theater, will go along with this. I think people have just lost the desire to actually be free. Anyway, on this, the cure was clearly worse than the disease. And I think it's, it's going to haunt us for generations to come. I mean, we now have, I have some small children who are, great nieces and nephews. They are now conditioned and will get frightened if they go out without a mask. Small children for more than a year at a time when they're very, very impressionable now believe that this is a necessity. And it's just another generation like those that grew up with airport security theater that are just going to say, okay, that's fine. Whatever, I will give up some of my freedom for security, even though I get neither, as Benjamin Franklin once said. So again, it was worse. The cure is worse than the disease, and I wish more people would be able to get that concept. Of course, my viewers, of course, being the intelligent people they are, obviously get it. You guys understand. My rant, you get. I get that. So that said, I think it's maybe time to get a little off into something else. And so we're going to have a little bit of a new part of the segment. London, Madrid, Bangkok, Moscow, Lincoln, Nebraska. From the four corners of the world, from the news capitals at home and abroad, today's headlines brought into focus. The issues and events that shape our time. Tales from SYL Ranch, information beacon of the internet. William Stone III and the Woke Report. An up-to-the-minute commentary from one of journalism's most trusted voices. inductee to the Lincoln High School Mummers Society. Now, here's William Stone III and the Woke Report. Yes, good evening. I'm William Stone III, and you're not. 10 points, by the way, if you get where that introduction actually originated. Unfortunately, of course, on this show, just like Whose Line Is It Anyway, the points are made up and they don't matter. Yes, the points on this show are exactly like clothes to a green Orion slave girl. They just don't matter. Anyway, as always, the top story on the Woke Report tonight.
The mob that stormed the Capitol on January 6th to try to stop Congress from carrying out its constitutional responsibilities were behaving like domestic enemies of our country. But let's be clear. The John Brennans, Adam Schiffs, and the oligarchs in big tech who are trying to undermine our constitutionally protected rights and turn our country into a police state with KGB-style surveillance are also domestic enemies and much more powerful and therefore dangerous than the mob that stormed the Capitol. Now, John Brennan said,
So I know looking forward that the members of the Biden team who have been nominated or have been appointed are now moving in laser-like fashion to try to uncover as much as they can about what looks very similar to insurgency movements that we've seen overseas, where they germinate in different parts of a country and they gain strength, and it brings together an unholy alliance frequently of religious extremists, authoritarians, fascists, bigots, racists, nativists, even libertarians.
Now, President Biden, I call upon you and all members of Congress from both parties to denounce these efforts by the likes of Brennan and others to take away our civil liberties that are endowed to us by our Creator and guaranteed in our Constitution. If you don't stand up to these people now, then our country will be in great peril.
As always, former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard is number one on my Woke Report because she gets it. And by the way, everything that we've been doing in terms of being driven insane and accepting the yoke of government when it comes to what's been going on for the last 1.25 years simply contributes more to this KGB-style police state that she correctly talks about us undergoing. Tulsi Gabbard is right. By the way, as always, Congresswoman, if you are not happy in your current relationship, get in contact with me. Email me at callin@sylranch.tv. I would be happy to court you, wine and dine you, and propose marriage to you. Other things in the Woke Report. Well, yesterday, a verdict, of course, was handed down in the Derrick Chauvin trial. Derrick Chauvin, 45, was convicted of second-degree unintentional murder, third-degree murder, and a second-degree unintentional manslaughter of George Floyd. Starseeds Player on YouTube saying she's one heck of a woman. Oh, yes. And as I say, we have at least one thing in common, aside from being, pretty level-headed and intelligent people. She's got that streak of hair that has to be, maintained artificially. I know, because I have this skunk beard that has to be maintained artificially. So we can talk about dyeing techniques. Anyway, he was sentenced, and the U.S. Justice Department immediately, like within minutes afterward, announced an investigation into the Minneapolis Police Department to see if they're scumbags and if they're racists. And guys, I keep saying, all you have to do to find out that they're not racist, that there really is no systemic racism anywhere in police, is listen to the first responder frequencies. Links below, scrolling past on my lower third in other windows than this one. But, links to where you can listen to first responders anytime, day or night. And the only time that a person's race is mentioned is if they have a suspect at large. And it's necessary to mention that he's white, he's black, he's Hispanic, he's Asian, because you have to have that information in order to find somebody, male, female, etc., what they're wearing, all of that. And it doesn't come up otherwise. It's not like they're going around looking for black people to kill. What happened in this case, pretty horrifying all the way around, but, opening an investigation as a result of that is simply nothing more than pandering and virtue signaling to the woke. That's why it's on my woke report. Also, riots that were incited by Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California's 43rd District were held on Tuesday evening, as well as Wednesday evening after the verdict, and people and police officers were assaulted. As usual, we see the usual for the last 330-some days. I think it's 336 today. Every night, somewhere in the U.S., rioting, looting, arson, robbery, armed robbery, assault with a deadly weapon, and oftentimes the murder of innocents. You don't hear about it because it doesn't fit the press's narrative. But it happens every single freaking night and has been for coming up on an entire freaking year. And this verdict did not halt it. They just went out and started screaming, well, this is only the beginning, and started doing the usual stuff. And they were egged on by Congresswoman Maxine Waters of California. And by the way, what the hell business does she have outside her district? If you're going to go incite violence and incite insurrection, you should probably do it in your own damn district in California and keep your nose out of Minnesota. God knows they have enough idiots running that. TGD at YouTube says, and the Democrats voted against censuring her. Talk about that momentarily, right now, in fact. Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene of Georgia's 13th District introduced a resolution to expel Congressman Waters due to the incitements of these and many other riots, as well as incitement of insurrection that has been made over the last 5 years. While there is ample video evidence of these incitements, I have to tell you that such a resolution for expellation and was always doomed to failure. The only times that members of Congress have been expelled in modern times is after they were already found guilty of significant civil crimes. The most recent person to be expelled from Congress was Congressman James Traficant. He was convicted before his expellation on 10 counts of bribery, including taking bribes, filing false tax returns, racketeering, and forcing his congressional staff to perform chores at his farm in Ohio, and on his boat in Washington, D.C. And he was then expelled on July 24th, 2001. He's the last one to be expelled in modern times. If you want to expel Congresswoman Waters or any other member of the House or Senate, you have to first convict them of a serious civil crime. Didn't happen. Anybody who's been there for very long knows that it was doomed to failure. And I'm sure that Congresswoman Greene knew that this was doomed to failure and was simply showboating. But you're right, the Democrats did vote against it, but it was always doomed to failure. You have to get them convicted of something in civil court first. Only then will the ethics committees, either in the House or the Senate, even bother to take it up. There's a process. You have to take this thing to an ethics committee. The ethics committee has to look at it and decide whether it's something that should come to a vote on the floor and all that. None of that happened and never was going to happen because Congresswoman Waters was not convicted of anything in a civil court. Go after her because you can. You can go after her for inciting violence and all that in a civil court. Oh, I've got one of my chat windows here. Let me remove it. I had one accidentally. Sorry. You can do it, but you have to first convict them. They're not convicted, then forget it. Just isn't going to happen. Just isn't going to happen. Stretchy Spirit says the vote was actually kind of close. Well, again, what they were probably voting on, because I didn't pay too much attention, but I know what the process is. The House member can take a vote to the floor to essentially send it to the Ethics Committee. And then the Ethics Committee spends their time looking into whether or not this congressperson has done something worthy of being expelled for. And then if they do find it, then they take it to a House vote where you have to win by a 2/3 majority. I looked this up once because people were talking about wanting to impeach Congress people, and you can't. You can't impeach Congress people nor senators. You have to go through this expellation process. And it's complicated. And the reason that nobody has been expelled, even though they probably should have, is because you have to really have been convicted of a civil crime first. So regardless of how close it was never going to go through the entire process, nor make it to the floor, nor get the necessary required votes. You have to convict her of something serious in the civil courts first. Then the ethics committee will say, well, yeah, they've done something bad, like Trafficant did. He was just horrifying. Obvious candidate, but he's the most recent one in history to be expelled. I'd have to look it up again, but the most number of people that were expelled from Congress was at the beginning of the Civil War. When the southern states seceded, well, their congressmen and senators were expelled simply because they had to be. But that's when the overwhelming majority of people were expelled from Congress. TDG says they brought charges against the orange one for less. Yes, absolutely. No problem, Starchy's player talking about it. Again, it's just a question of, I don't think, if anybody knew the history of it, I have to assume that Congresswoman Green is smart enough to know the history of it. It seems to me like it's just pandering. It's just showboating. I think you could get her convicted in a civil court. The video evidence alone ought to be completely damning. But you have to do that first. You're never going to get it through this entire process unless you get her convicted of something in a civil court. But related to that, not Congresswoman Waters, but yesterday, insurrectionists, and we have to call them that because that's what the Democrats called them at the federal Capitol, stormed the Oklahoma Capitol. Oklahoma has recently passed a law that protects drivers who injure or kill protesters while fleeing the scene of a riot. I have no problem with this. I have seen some videos. There was one in Portland, I think it was, where there was a bunch of protesters headed out onto the freaking interstate highway or a freeway or something like that around there. I'm not familiar enough with the area, but they were completely covered by, this guy's coming down the road on the interstate. They're coming off an exit. There's a whole clump of trees between the exit and him. So they come walking out, and he's screaming down there at 65 miles an hour, slams on the brakes and hits one of them. I don't know if he killed him or not. And they get all upset. And I'm like, well, he did what he could. And then they started, going nuts, and he drove off. Well, I have no problem with any state that's going to say, no, if there's a riot in progress, you should be able to run down these bastards. I have no problem with this. From my money, what the problem is that their parents should have told them not to play in traffic in the first place. But yesterday, the Oklahoma House of Representatives came to a halt for about 10 minutes while the insurrectionists in the state capitol chanted and interrupted lawmakers. A group of about 24 people at the Capitol protested various bills that had moved through the House and Senate. I assume the biggest one was that one. Some of the other ones they put through were what they think is an anti-protest bill, which, again, is really just saying if you're stuck in the middle of a riot, you have permission to run these bastards over. Stop playing in traffic, you stupid little children. They also passed some kind of anti-abortion bill, which I haven't seen, and Senate Bill 2, which would bar transgender girls from being on girls' sports teams. Again, a law I have absolutely no problem with. The reality is that when you get trained athletes, men have a significant advantage in terms of upper body strength and all other kinds of things than women do. So when you transition, a trans woman who began life as a man still has a huge upper body strength advantage over a woman and other athletic advantages. If they didn't, there would be no separate women's sports. There would be integrated, NBA would have, the Chicago Bulls would have male and female players on the same team. There is clearly a biological advantage that doesn't just disappear if you transition to a woman from a man. And in fact, I've forgotten who said it. I make these stupid marketing memes all the time. One of them I made about this was an MMA fighter who was a very good MMA fighter who said that she had never been punched as hard and just been essentially battered around in the ring as she was by a trans woman. This person had a significant advantage genetically that does not go away just because you transition. So saying, girls, if trans women can't compete in girls' sports makes perfect sense to me. Sorry. If you want to compete in a sport, you better just do it as whatever gender you were born with, because that's what you've got the advantage in. If it wasn't an advantage, then they wouldn't have it as separate sports. It's just freaking ridiculous. So I have no problem with that bill. So these insurrectionists apparently got intense after the group filed into the House gallery on the 5th floor of the Capitol. They later said that they were asked to leave the building after what looked like a shouting match in the gallery. So they were getting into it with each other and getting into it with the people in the House at the time. Jason Hand on YouTube says, I have no problem with them having their own competition. It's unfair and disrespectful to women to let them play in women's competition. That's another possibility you could do. You could have trans sports where you have trans women competing against each other. Trans men in their own sports competing against each other. But it's just saying, we're going to ignore the obvious and clear biology involved here is stupid. You're just saying, okay, we're going to let trans men come in and kick the snot out of all the biologically women. There's just no getting around it. That's what will happen. Anyway, these insurrectionists, as usual, chanted things like no justice, no peace, Black Lives Matter, as well as a number of expletives for which these uneducated protesters are very well known. Usual crap. Other things from the Woke Report. The UN voted to have Iran on a Women's Rights Commission. The UN elected Iran to a 4-year term on its Commission on the Status of Women, a commission which supposedly is, quote, the principal lobby, global intergovernmental lobby exclusively dedicated to the promotion of gender equality and the empowerment of women. TDG is laughing, I assume, at this stupid thing they're doing with the UN. Yeah. The amazing thing was there were at least 4 members of Western group democracies on this committee who voted for Iran, and these countries that it was a secret ballot, but there's a website and an organization that is, basically saying, we go down and we look at all these votes and we figure out who actually voted for him, do a certain level of private oversight. The countries that they found had voted for him, get this, were Australia, Auckland, Canada, Finland, France, Latvia, Germany, Luxembourg, the Netherlands, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and the United States. All voted to have Iran on a Commission on Women's Rights. Actually, that's a double face palm. In what universe does that make any slightest sense? This is a country that is, in fact, and by the way, I've got my glasses for now. My new lighting doesn't reflect it so badly, and my eyes changed, and I kind of need it. This is a country that literally is enforcing things like burqas, not as a choice, but as what I can only term a slave garment. You don't have a choice. You don't have the choice to go and get an education to be equal to a man in Iran. In what universe? This is one of those deals that just makes you go, oh, for God's sake. The United Nations is a pointless joke. At this point, I am totally in favor of the United States just pulling completely out of the UN and giving them absolutely no more money and letting them collapse as a result. Jason Hand on YouTube says, if it was 1970s Iran, yes, Iran, when the Shah of Iran was in power, was a much more westernized, progressive place. Women were, in fact, getting much more equal rights. But unfortunately, when Ayatollah Khomeini ousted him, that totally reversed, and now they're just slaves again. They're chattel, they're property. Another one that came up that's really weird. I can't even figure this one out, right? There's a tweet thread that you can find on Twitter. I've got a link to it on the description box in Facebook and in YouTube. It'll be there after, as always, when I put a description in after the fact on Twitch, because I can't do it before the fact. But there's a tweet thread that just went completely bonkers today. What happened is this. It's mine. What happened is this. I'm now seeing over and over and over and over on YouTube what's now becoming irritating advertisement for Nissan, some Nissan car, with Brie Larson doing the ad. Now, in all, honesty, just laying it out there, I found, I don't think she's a brilliant actress or anything based on what little of her work I've seen. It seemed like a block of wood in Captain Marvel. I really haven't seen her other work besides that, so I can't really tell you for sure. I don't know anything about her personally, so I don't know what kind of person she is. I don't judge any people on that basis. A celebrity, God knows what they're really like. And I did find when she was on press junkets for Avengers and Captain Marvel, I found her ultimately rather irritating. But I don't think I'm alone in that. If you look at some of those videos, her co-stars were kind of irritated with her. Jeremy Renner has a just brilliant moment because she's talking about how she feels like she has this, kind of some kind of responsibility to be woke and, all this junk. And Jeremy Renner's just sitting there going, oh, God, why am I listening to this crap? And when they get to him, he says, well, I don't think I have any big... I think I should just, give a good performance, So I found her kind of irritating when she was doing stuff like that, talking about as if her being an actress somehow meant that she was really important in the world. You're just an actress. If you're good, fine. Hit your marks, speak your lines. I don't care. Anyway, she is doing this ad, and particularly with one of my channels that I usually watch. Gosh, why am I blanking on it right now? Because I'd love to plug him. Gray Still Plays. He goes through and plays games, usually doing weird things with them to cause them to do bizarre things. Like adding a whole bunch of zeros to items in Minecraft, changing the configuration, stuff like that, just to see how bizarre he can get it. So I watch his quite a lot. He comes out with a video every day, and every single freaking day, for I do not know how long right now, this damned thing has been coming up. This, and it's a non-skippable ad. It's like 15, 20 seconds long. I'm not sure, but it's non-skippable. So I'm sitting there, and you're just like, oh, God, when is this going to end? When is this going to end? And then you see it again. You're just like, when is this going to end? When is this going to end? Because I watch most of my YouTube content on my phone. If it was on my desktop, then it would be caught by, uBlock Origin, my ad blocker. But I'm watching it on my phone, and I see it over and over and over, and I'm just starting to get very sick of it. It's becoming irritating to the point where I posted, I'm starting to get tired of Brie Larson's face, and, and starting to get a little irritated with all this. You can check and see it if you want and see the entire stream. Oh, my God. I was flabbergasted. What I did was it's a 3 tweet stream, 3 or 4 tweets where I'd done a screen cap of one saying I'm starting to get irritated. I saw the damn thing again. I did a screen cap of it, put it in the same thread, said this is really annoying. Did a third one, and then I made another thing that I'm going to talk about in a second. And it was like that. And for some bizarre reason, this blew completely up. Like every Brie Larson / Nissan, and I assume it was Brie Larson fan because they probably couldn't care less about a car, they started quote tweeting this thing and bouncing back at me in the chat, and it was just bizarre. It was just like, it's just a friggin' ad. It's an ad. Get a life, you know? I was saying I was irritated by seeing this freaking ad over and over again. But these woke idiots, you know, they immediately started quote tweeting me saying that I was a misogynist or, you know, and hated women or stuff like that. I was just like, no, I found her marginally irritating when she was doing press junkets, and I'm getting sick of this freaking ad with her on it. And the amusing part was the last time, one that I did, where I dropped this screen cap in there, I said, okay, I'm a proud Jeep owner. Hey, Jeep. I'm a proud owner of a Jeep Wrangler. Hey, Jeep. You know, hey, at Jeep. Why don't you hire at Gina Carano to do a competitive ad? You know, so that I can see something that, you know, at least I like. You know, put her in I'll loan you my Jeep Wrangler. You know, put her in something like that. And that's an ad that I'm happy to watch repeatedly, as opposed to this Nissan one of a car I'm never going to buy by an actress that I find marginally irritating. You just add it all up. And I mentioned, too, in one of the tweets, Nissan, I don't know why you're putting her out there in the first place, right? Because if you're going to show her to science fiction fans like me, there is probably a 50% chance that just seeing her alone is going to irritate them. It wasn't with me, it was a contributing factor. But, you know, there is a huge thing about her. You know, right or wrong, there's a giant thing about her. And so it's a poor choice, in my opinion. And I said so. I said, hey, why don't you Jeep? Why don't you know, I'll hand you my Wrangler. Put Gina Carano in it, and I'd happily watch that ad. Stretchy Spirit says on YouTube, Twitter is a bad place. I haven't been on since Gina got unjustly canceled. Unfortunately, I have to be on it to some extent because it is a major portion of my my advertising. I spend a little time on there, just sort of being there, you know, having some type of presence, posting something from time to time, just to be there. And I'll try to get stuff where people will quote tweet me. And on one level, I really don't care, you know, if they quote tweet me and stuff. I will always engage people who quote tweet me every single time, whether it's a good quote tweet or a bad one, or if they're responding to my tweets. I will always, always, always engage you in an intelligent fashion, because there ain't no such thing as bad publicity. I could get my name out there. I can be seen. The channel can be seen. So, you know, and when this was all going down before the show started, I said, you know, I'm adding this to my list of topics tonight. Here's a video. Why don't you pop in and we can talk about it on live? Of course, they're like, no, I'm not going to do that. But, you know, which doesn't surprise me. But gets my name out there, gets the show URL out there, and potentially get some more viewers. So I'll do that. But I just was watching this all blow up, and it was insanity. You know, I'm just like, why does anybody care this much? You know, all I was doing was posting these sort of amusing deals like, would you please stop this? This is getting annoying. You know, I wasn't even particularly serious about any of it. And they're all accusing me of being, you know, misogynistic. And I would come back like, did you read the last quote where I talked about putting a woman in a competing ad? You know, how does that add up to misogyny? It was crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I finally got somebody who was relatively cool about it and was saying, well, this is all a reaction because Brie Larson's been through the grinder and all this, and her fans are really sensitive and all that. And I said, well, look, I get that, you know, maybe some of that's going on, but you got to just yourself not immediately assume something horrible and negative about a person just because they talk about something you may be related to, you know, you may have an interest in. I mean, God, the number of times over the years, if I really took, you know, notice very much of what somebody says about a Star Trek actor, you know, If they say, oh, William Shatner's a terrible actor, I'm like, well, okay, so what? And tell it to him. Doesn't impact me. I like watching the guy, but you don't. Okay, so what? It's just it's this weird woke thing where they have to come in and come down, and it was crazy. Jason on YouTube says, a problem with today, corporations see bad publicity as the same as good publicity. They were focused on the Brie hate and not the actual criticism of the repetition of the same ad. Yeah, exactly. They were mostly, that was all they were focused on. When it comes to publicity, I think there is, when you get to be a certain size, bad publicity. But when you're my size, anytime anybody mentions you in any way, in any kind of context, I'm all for it. There was one time when somebody went off on a lengthy tweet rant about how I'm a fascist because I like Star Trek, the original series. Turns out today that's a fascist show. Who knew? But I didn't bother to engage them in that particular instance because it was just long tweet string. And I was just like, okay, well, you've just repeatedly shared the video that you say proves that I'm a fascist. Well, that means all of your followers are probably now going to click on that video to get pissed off. It's like, fine. That works for me. Any reason to click on my videos. When you get to be a certain size, like Nissan, I think you do have to worry about bad publicity. If you're showing this ad to science fiction fans like me, who may have something of a bad taste in their mouth to begin with, and a bunch of them were paying attention to the people who were really coming down on Brie Larson. And I don't think it was necessarily that, deserved. Yeah, it looked like her co-stars on Avengers didn't really like her that much. And yeah, she was like pompous about how she had this duty to be some kind of role model or, to be woke and all that. It was kind of pompous and irritating. But beyond that, there's not much else to say. And there was a lot of crap going on with her. So, I get, but it's just like, again, for me, if it was some Star Trek actor, you could say, oh, Patrick Stewart sucks. You're like, okay, well, that's what you think. And, I wouldn't care. TDG on YouTube says, how effective of an ad is it if you remember the spokesperson but not the product? Yeah, exactly. I remember Brie Larson. I know it's a Nissan ad because I've seen the damn thing so many times. I have no idea what car. Maybe it wasn't a specific car. I don't know. Maybe it was just for the company. But now, the only thing I'm remembering about that ad is Brie Larson because of all of her fans went ape crap crazy. Again, you can take a look at it. It's amazing. Just amazing to me. If I look at it right now, I bet, because I looked at it about 20 minutes before the show. I bet that if I look right now on Twitter, I'm going to find... I got 18 notifications. Yep, 1, 2... 3, 4, another quote treat, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, I guess 10 new responses and quote tweets just in the last hour and a half. It's insanity. It's pure insanity. And a lot of them are doing stuff like throwing up Brie Larson memes. Like I care. Again, for me, this is more a question of this freaking repetitive, ad that I can't skip. And the fact, again, that it is Brie Larson. And to some extent, she irritates me just a little bit. But it's more about this freaking ad. But I've got all of these people who are posting Brie Larson memes and animated GIFs. And just like, God. And that's another thing, by the way, critics of mine, if all you can do is communicate with memes, that tells me you're not very educated. Try using words. You can use English, which is my native language, or you can use French, which I'm also nearly fluent in. Feel free. And I'll engage you. If you get to be sane, that's fine with me. But I'm just going to talk. I'm not going to go nuts. They were like, "Oh, you're crying," and I'm like, "No, I'm not crying." "Oh, you hate women." "No, check out the last post in that thread." And crazy, just absolutely crazy. Again, just this crazy woke crap. They can't just say, "Oh, okay, well, you don't like it, you don't like it." Who cares? It in no way, if you're a fan, it in no way actually affects you. It's the same thing when I hear people with Kurtz-Trek going on about how it's really awful that people are saying bad things about it. I'm like, well, okay. I spent a huge chunk of my lifetime when Star Trek was considered just stupid geek stuff, and I was denigrated for it. And if I really spent a lot of time worrying about what people said about it, I would be a very unhappy camper. Just like, okay, you don't like it. Fine. Don't care. How does this affect you personally? Really? Scroll past like a normal person rather than feeling compelled to jump out and tell the other person how badly wrong they are. Jason Hand on YouTube says, the younger people using fascism and Nazism don't even know what it means. Absolutely. Those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. Absolutely. It's a problem again, having taught at the college level for several years. I know that K through 12 has not been teaching much of anything for at least a decade. And now, with the virus restrictions in place, I'm absolutely certain that students are learning nothing. So, of course, they don't know what fascism and Nazism is because they were never taught it. So, DDG says there are none so deaf as those who won't listen. Yeah. Anyhow, it's an amusing tweet string. Feel free to go over and look at it if you want. It's just crazy. I'm not suggesting even that you respond. Just look at it and go, I can't believe. Because that was my reaction. Like, what the hell? Why are these people constantly going after me and tweet quoting me? It doesn't make any sense. It's just a commercial, for Christ's sake. What the hell? Get a life. Marketing coordinator on YouTube says, to all patriots, Marbury versus Madison, 5 U.S. 137 at 1308. No provision of the Constitution is designed to be without effect. Anything that is in conflict is null and void of law. Oh, if only that were something that the Supreme Court held up. But they never, ever do. If that were actually held up, there wouldn't be a single gun law on the books because the Second Amendment trumps it. They would not be passing things wanting D.C. to be a state because that's unconstitutional. That it's literally in the Constitution. You'd have to have an amendment first. Clearly, they don't give a rat's ass about the Constitution anymore. Jason Hand on YouTube says, Viacom CBS shares dropped a lot. Not sure Kurtz-Trek is going to last. I hope not. I got something to say about that a little bit later, as a matter of fact. Just as a sort of a side note, because I mentioned Gina Carano, my beautiful Gina Carano, with whom I am deeply in love. Gina, if you're not currently happy in your relationship, just like former Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, do send an email to callin@sylranch.tv. I will be happy to wine and dine and ultimately propose marriage to you. In any case, the fascists have come after Gina Carano again in a roundabout way. Gina Carano, like a lot of celebrities, supports various, charitable causes. And she doesn't do it in the giant, in-your-face woke way. But she supports a number of causes, like lots of people do. Like me, I support the rehabilitation fund for Amanda Smith, a former Batwoman script coordinator who, through the utter incompetence of the Batwoman production staff, was left crippled from the waist down, or even farther up. I've forgotten now. But I support her. It scrolls past to my regular lower thirds every single episode. I have it in the descriptions on every single one of my streams about where you can go to look at it. So I support her. I don't stick it out in people's faces for the most part, but I do support her. Gina Carano does the same thing. Well, these stupid fascists say that they're that they're trying to say, okay, don't, no matter how much merit there is to these various causes she supports, don't donate to them, because we want to cancel Gina Carano. And if you're associated with her, even if it's to give money to somebody for a charity, don't do it if Gina Carano supports it. Utter insanity. You know, these fascists don't care about anyone at all. If Gina Carano supported the Amanda Smith Rehabilitation Fund, they would say, don't give Amanda Smith money. Just ridiculous. Stupid and ridiculous. It's typical woke behavior, sadly. Marketing coordinator on YouTube says, forget SCOTUS. You use it in the lower courts, and it's never been overturned in 218 years. Yes, it's case law. I guess I don't know that much about it. All I know is we have lots of gun control laws in the books. Not a single one of them is actually constitutional. The language of the Second Amendment is quite clear. So, as a side note, total side note with Gina Carano, GinaCarano.net fan site launches very soon, within an hour or so, I think. Let me see if I can, GinaCarano.net, see if it's been launched yet. Oh, yes, it has launched. It was going to launch within a couple of hours of me starting, and it has, in fact, launched. Gina had this to say on Twitter. This site is run by a group of incredibly precious people that I met over the last year. It's completely fan-run, but I'll make sure to send them over some goodies and pop in from time to time. Go show this site some love. And so I have retweeted that, and also have a link to it. It is GinaCarano.net. Just glancing at it here, lots of pictures that I would certainly enjoy of Gina Carano going through the top. So I'll probably make an account there. Yeah, so they've got all kinds of new stuff here for her and some old stuff. But in any case, Gina likes the site. Come out and go to GinaCarano.net and have a look for yourself if you're interested. DDG on YouTube says, dang, Gina should come out in favor of Planned Parenthood then. There you go. Yeah, you know, turn it on its ear. Come out in favor of something that the woke love. Yeah, exactly. Starshi's Player on YouTube says, is such a classy lady. Yes. Not only did she never do anything wrong, she seems to be very kind to her fans. She's like I remember George Takei being before he came out. George Takei used to be very humble and understood that his fans from Star Trek were the sole reason that he had any notoriety or fame whatsoever. Very nice, very generous with his fans. Then he came out and everything went to hell. But Gina Carano strikes me as very much like that. She seems to be a very kind person with her fans. Don't know her personally, can't say anything about her personally, but she certainly seems very nice with her fans. She does not respond negatively when people post horrible things about her, which would be easy to do. It's somebody who lets all that stuff go. And that's like you say, a mark of class, Starseeds Player. So have a look at that, GinaCarano.net. Also, sort of woke related, gotta talk about some of the stuff. Oops, wrong card. Let me know, by the way, if the bridge sound effects in the background are too loud and intrusive. I don't think they will be, but I can't tell. There has been some status changes, not exactly recent, with respect to Star Trek Picard. Well, they're getting Q, and we just found out they're getting WORF, which, given how they have done complete character assassinations on all of those characters, I have to assume means that they're going to assassinate both Q and WORF. My assumption, given the level of blood and gore that they love on that show, that probably Q will wind up, say, raping Picard to death every single episode and then resuscitating him at the very end. That would be on par with what they usually do. Or maybe he'll dismember every member of Picard's crew and his friends, only to re-put them together at the end of every episode, and do it in excruciatingly gory and, explicit fashion. I can't imagine. They took Harry Mudd, right, a lovable rogue, and made him into a mass murderer. They took the Tribbles, basically there for comic relief, and made them into something horrible. I can't imagine that they won't take Q and turn him into something terrible. Here was a character that just got, he was dangerous, but he was also sort of a friend of Picard's in a roundabout way. He was more a nuisance, and portrayed as a very dangerous nuisance than anything else. But when you got Picard, all bets are completely off. I certainly expect blood and gore and guts and veins in his teeth and eating dead burnt bodies, because that's the sort of crap that Kurtzman oversees. I mean, you gotta remember, this is all being produced by a guy whose name escapes me, who explicitly last season wanted the two Romulan characters who were related to blood relations to have intimate relationships of a kind I cannot speak about on the YouTube side without the stream suddenly cutting out. He really wanted that. It was somebody who said, oh, no, you can't go there. But boy, was that implied. I mean, you said to watch those two characters. They had a creepy vibe right from the beginning. He wanted to be explicit. So I'm sure he's going to screw with Q. TGG, you're saying no confirmation on WORF, just a new WORF online game. Oh, really? Okay, maybe they're not going to screw with him. I hope not. If they did, I was prepared to say something about that, but if they did, you got to remember these are the guys that created Kling Orcs. Things that don't look like Klingons at all, and clearly never watched any of the shows because they thought that what they were doing with the Klingons in Discovery Season 2 was somehow novel, or Season 1 was novel in some way. They never watched. They thought, oh, Klingons have always just been two-dimensional bad guys. Have you guys ever watched Star Trek The Next Generation? So if they got him, what would they do? I mean, the last time we seen Klingons with these idiots, they have giant appliances, everything all over their faces, and teeth appliances that make it totally impossible to even understand them, and totally impossible for an actor to emote through the damned appliances. So let us hope, TDG, as you say, that what Michael Dorn was tweeting about when he mentioned that is an online game as opposed to being on Star Trek Picard. Because that would be just awful. Jason Hand on YouTube says, did I see the strange numbers for the latest Batwoman episode? Yes. I don't know what to make of that. Going from less than 1 million, something like less than 500,000, I don't remember exactly, to 1.3 million, I think. Not that 1.3 million is a very good number anyway, but how did they make that jump? It certainly makes you wonder whether somebody isn't screwing with the numbers, but it would be weird of them to do that. Those numbers are used all over the industry in terms of doing stuff. So I don't know what to make of it. I heard it and I saw it and I went, what? Because aside from those of us who are masochists, or, I don't review it anymore because it sucks so bad. But I do like to watch heel versus babyface, because I watch the show largely so I can go over and watch heel versus babyface go through it, because he'll catch everything that I usually thought, almost everything, and it's just like, how stupid, how boring, how come they did this? This is dumb. It made their character look bad. It's just woke garbage. And he'll go through that, and I get a kick out of that, and so knowing what's happening in the episode. But most people who watch him even aren't watching Batwoman. If you look at his comments, a huge number of people are saying, thank you for watching this show and going through it. We appreciate your pain so that we don't have to. Who's watching this crap? Yeah, Jason Hand on YouTube saying, a 70% demo increase. Exactly. It's like, what the frack? It's hard for me to imagine that suddenly that happened overnight, and it's such a large margin of difference between last week. It's a bad show. Only the woke watch it, and there aren't that many of them. Jason says you watch him, meaning heel versus babyface, and Nerdrotic. Yeah, I watch a number of them. Nerdrotic is somebody else I watch too. I keep hoping. You can feel free to tell them this. Sometimes they get together and do a live stream. One or two of these people that I tend to watch in the fanish space together. And occasionally, they'll have it scheduled where it's a regular thing. But the other person, one person, won't be available. I'm always happy to fill in. You can always throw me a bone. Let somebody who's not a big name on YouTube get seen by more people. Please feel free. Heel versus babyface, Doomcock are good. Yes, all people I watch, particularly with Batwoman. Heel versus babyface is just so hysterical. Because he's just every single stupid plot point he will find, and it's painful, and I feel the pain because A, I've watched it, but B, he's just so, oh my God, I can't believe how stupid this is, and gets pretty emotional about it. And I think validly so. It's just such a dumb show. If I didn't kind of want to be aware of what's happening at this point, because I don't want to review it, it sucks so bad. If I didn't want to kind of be aware of what he was watching, I probably wouldn't watch it at all. There were several weeks after I said, screw this, I've got, Superman and Lois, I have something good to review. I'm not going to touch this crap anymore. And I had several weeks where I went without watching it. But what I found was I was watching Heel versus Babyface, and he was going through it, and I'm like, I think I want to see this so that I know what kind of horror he's dealing with. Jason Hand on YouTube says they got to bump it up sometimes to counter the drops. Again, I don't know what to make of it. Very odd for them to screw with those kind of viewing numbers. It'd be very odd. It's just that it's why I don't think that they're probably making much money off of the Star Trek property on what is now Paramount Plus. Because if you look at the real numbers, and I found this out by watching Sci-Fi Channel evolve over the years. If you look at the real numbers, in the United States, there are only about 4 million diehard science fiction fans who will watch science fiction. Most of them are also crossing over with people who will watch Star Trek. That is not a very large number. If it were broadcast television, you would need about 18 million people in order to keep a good show on the air. That's a figure that's been around for a long time, 18 million. There aren't that many science fiction fans in the United States. If you want to make money on science fiction, Paramount Plus, here's a big tip. If you want to make money on science fiction, you have to make the budget lower. You can't just go all out crazy. It's very unusual when you have a crossover film like Star Trek IV, which was a crossover film with general audiences, or Star Trek in 2009, which was a crossover with general audiences. It's very unusual that you have that. You got to go with a lower budget and a smarter script. Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, almost universally hailed as the best Star Trek movie to date. Well, they had a small budget because Star Trek the Motion Picture they spent the farm on, and it didn't make back in the immediate term what it made money when you got things like home video and stuff like that. But it didn't make a ton of money in the theater because you only got about 4 million people who will actually go and see it for sure. And so they said the second time around, screw this, we're not going to put a big budget on it. And they had a much smarter script and a much smarter director, and they got a much bigger profit because they didn't put as much money in it. So the 4 million people who went to see it was a much better profit. So Paramount Plus, I got to tell you, if you really want to pull them in, you got to have smart scripts and not as big a budget. There are ways that a good producer can figure out how to spend a budget in a smart way. You just don't have to go crazy about it. You have a smart script and a lower budget. and I don't think that they're getting that many views, because not only are there not that many science fiction fans, there is even a smaller subset of people, of those fans, who actually like the Kurtzman Star Trek. It's a very small number of people. I suspect that if you looked at the viewership, it would be akin to what Batwoman's getting, maybe a little more. But most people are not going to pay to watch that, and there aren't that many of us in the first place. Starship's Player on YouTube says, Heel versus Babyface Batman woman reviews crack you up. Oh, yeah, me too. Me too. Absolutely. Jason Nant on YouTube says, I must be rare. Not Marvel or DC, Star Wars or Star Trek. You like them all. Well, you're among those 4 million or so. You're among those 4 million who are general science fiction fans and will watch stuff. But if you watch like I did, if you saw Sci-Fi Channel from the beginning, originally they just did science fiction. Even if it was reruns, they just did science fiction. Their heyday. They had Stargate, the Stargate series. They had, Farscape. They had, I think they were the ones that had, I may be wrong, but I think they had Battlestar Galactica. That was in their heyday. But the viewership was not gigantic. It's not like the Super Bowl. You're not going to get the Super Bowl numbers. And what happened was, over time, they started doing less and less science fiction. I mean, now you can get pro wrestling on there. So they started doing less and less actual science fiction. And when they do come up with original programming, it's stuff like Sharknado. Low budget, tongue-in-cheek, some crap stuff. And I shouldn't say crap. Sharknado is funny for what it is. And you don't expect to have a giant budget for a movie about sharks caught up in a tornado, But they got it. The audience for science fiction fans is not that large. Not really. Let's see. Starship's Player on YouTube saying Battlestar Galactica, Farscape, lower budget. Yes, absolutely. Very enjoyable shows. Very, very smart scripts. Absolutely smart scripts. Marketing coordinator on YouTube says Carl Miller, Constitutional Law, MeWe Group. Oh, really? Okay. I'll have to take a look at that. I know what the Constitution says. I'm a strict originalist. I believe that the words mean exactly what they meant in 1776, 1779, and nothing more and nothing less. And by that token, we should not have 99.99999999999% of the federal government that we do now. So I'll have a look over there. I'm on MeWe. I think I've got it in my description. Let me see what my description actually says. I don't remember. I think I've got it in my description as to what that is. So where I'm at on MeWe. So I've got a group out there for Tales from SYL Ranch. I'm on every social media known to man. TDG on YouTube says most shows nowadays in all genres are SJW dumpster heaps. Yeah, I think you're generally right, which is part of the reason why Superman and Lois is such an amazing departure from that. They're not doing that. They're not doing nihilism. I can't wait for that show to come back, and I hope it lasts many, many, many years. It's an awesome show. So, Star Trek stuff out of the way. I have to talk about what, if you're going by the numbers for the virus, what can only be termed an absolute pandemic in the United States, and what we need to do to stop it. Because in 2019, 485 people died of heart disease in Lancaster County, Nebraska, with a population of roughly 324,000. And we have only had 232 who've died of the virus. In 2019, 659,041 Americans died of heart disease, and only 581,902-ish have died of the virus. And some of those, I know, are padded numbers. So if we have a virus pandemic, clearly, we have a heart disease pandemic in the United States. Those of you suffering from heart disease, sorry, I'm going to make a little bit of fun here. I don't mean that you don't have a serious illness. You'll see. So we have a heart disease pandemic in the United States. If you use the virus numbers, we can't call it anything else. So in order to quickly solve this horrifying health problem, I believe the following measures should be adopted. So in order to prevent the spread of ideas that would lead to further heart disease, anyone who suffers from it must be immediately executed. Anyone found to have any symptoms of heart disease must be immediately executed. All restaurants that don't serve heart-healthy dishes must be immediately and permanently closed. All non-heart-healthy foods must be immediately removed from all grocery stores and destroyed. All non-heart-healthy crops must be immediately destroyed. Any person or company found to be growing or harboring non-heart-healthy foods must be immediately executed. Any person or company found to be harboring individuals with or symptoms of heart disease must be immediately executed. 3 times every day, every citizen must be herded from their homes at gunpoint for exercise. Anyone found to have a body mass index above or below a certain range must be immediately executed. The press and social media must immediately undertake a propaganda campaign to normalize all of these measures necessary to eradicate heart disease. And anyone who speaks out against these measures must be immediately executed. This particularly includes the boards or high-ranking people in corporations or any entity whose company ever crosses these lines or protests. Has to be done. It has to be. If we've had to do everything that we've had to do, as I described at the beginning of this, regarding the virus, it only makes sense. And I can always say, as they do, we got to do it for the children. Anyhow, that is my little piece of bit of a satire. Again, the guys who have heart disease, I totally understand. I'm not making fun of you. I'm using it as an example because heart disease still is the number one killer in the United States. And it outpaces, in the Lancaster County, it outpaces the virus by more than double. It's a lot closer when you come to the federal level, but it's still higher than the virus by more than 100,000. Seems to me like if we're going to do what we have with the virus, we better do the same or worse with heart disease, because that's something you don't just get rid of. You can't get a vaccination for that. You know, if you're going to stop that, you have to take some more drastic measures. But clearly, if we've got that many people dying of it, it's a pandemic. TDG claims the BIPOC, I'm not sure what BIPOC exemption is. You may have to spell that one out for me. I don't know. Well, let's see. It is about 10 minutes to 11, which means I've been at this for a couple of hours. And I can actually see for once. As I mentioned, my glasses prescription changed a bit. I can still see the big 42-inch that's 3 or so feet away from me without them, but it's a hell of a lot easier with them. And I recently uncovered, I did not realize, that my family had one of those nice circular lights that you're supposed to use for black or indigenous people of color. That's what you are, DDG. Well, you know, if you're since it's woke, we'll let you live, but you better shut up. Anyway, because there's this circular light, I discovered that I can view things without having this bad reflection off of both the light and the screen in front of me. So not only can I see the screen in front of me, it's much, much easier to read. So probably from now on, you'll see me with glasses. So. Anyhow, I've been on this for about 2 hours now. It's not a bad thing for me to sign off because I find that it's easier for people to approach my live streams after the fact to watch on demand if they're a little bit shorter. 3+ hours-ish tends to turn people off. It's the way when I do prepared videos, I usually aim for about 15 minutes. That's what the average person can deal with. And this one I'll probably be pulling out at least one clip tomorrow or the next day. because some of this stuff is so bizarre. Why not? So, I guess, let's see here. Jason Hand on YouTube says, I'm emailing Gary. This segment is Friday Night Tights. Okay. You want to give it to me on Twitter? I'll give him your Twitter. Feel free. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of sort of Friday Night Tights in terms of wrestling, there is a video on YouTube. It shouldn't be. It's here in violation of copyright. I guess I won't link to it, but you can find it very easily on the YouTube side. If you go to YouTube and you search for The Wrestler 1974, it's different from the more recent The Wrestler. This one was produced by American Wrestling Association back in the 1974, way back in the kayfabe era. It was produced by the major owner and promoter of the American Wrestling Association, which is the territory in which I grew up, named Vern Gagne. And it's amazing. You have to remember, this is in the kayfabe era, right? When they pretended that all the storylines were real, that the match outcomes weren't predetermined. And so this is a movie about, it has pro wrestlers as kind of like Rocky, almost. It actually predates Rocky, I think. But it's kind of like the Rocky for pro wrestling if pro wrestling was still kayfabe, if they still pretended it was real. It is so bizarre because there's all of these. If you're a big wrestling fan, you'll know them. But there's all of these wrestlers from the 70s and 80s. If you watch closely, you'll even see a very young Ric Flair in there. The main characters are played by wrestlers. You know, the main character on this, because he had an ego the size of Jupiter, as I mentioned, it was produced by Vern Gagne. Well, Vern Gagne, who was the AWA's perennial heavyweight champion because he ran the place, he is in this thing as the heavyweight champion under another name. And there is a major subplot that involves, and there's all kinds of other wrestlers. Dick the Bruiser, Crusher, it was big in that territory. I mean, just all these wrestlers. Dusty Rhodes is in this thing. It's amazing. The Wrestler 1974. And the most amazing part about it is it's got a subplot that involves gangsters pressuring the promoter, who in this, of course, is just somebody who books matches. That's all. Pressuring him into making his wrestlers throw fights because they're betting on the matches. It's an amazing piece of garbage to watch. But if you have any interest in professional wrestling, it is a fascinating thing to see. It's a testament to Vern Gagne's gigantic ego, and it's not a very good movie. You watch the end of it, the very end, and you just go, "Oh, come on, man! Why did you do that?" But it's fascinating to watch. You can find it on YouTube. The Wrestler 1974. If you have any interest in professional wrestling from that era, it's just an incredible movie to watch because it's so weird. It is so weird. Anyway, Jason, yes, feel free to give my Twitter or anybody else to him. I'm always happy to sit in for somebody on anything, whether it's politics, the fanish world, or for that matter, pro wrestling. I can talk about that. So happy to do that. If they want to throw a bone to somebody who doesn't have that big a following. So anyway, I guess that is about all that I have to say about that. I would love to keep the conversation going, so please leave your comments, questions, and nasty remarks. I will do my best to respond to you. And of course, like, sub, hit the notification bell, and share me on social media, because that's how I grow. So thanks for watching this episode of Tales from SYL Ranch, where everyone is entitled to my opinion. And I'm Bill Stone.
Ultimate power in this world has always been one simple thing: the control and manipulation of minds.